morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance, otherwise known as MCDF, for co-organizing the first Africa ECG Forum with the African Development Bank Group, as well as Making Finance Work for Africa. The MCDF is a very important partner to the African Development Bank and have co-organized several key knowledge-sharing forums with us, including the recent AFDB Transport Forum. I was actually kidding with Frederick earlier that he needs to just set up an office within AFDB here because I see him almost every other week. But once again, thank you very much for the partnership. You've been a proactive partner, and also thank you to Making Finance Work for Africa. And of course, you're essentially part of us because you're here embedded within us. It is a pleasure to be here today to discuss a topic that has become critical to Africa's future. That is the environmental, social, and governance disclosure and its role in attracting finance for sustainable development. Africa is at a crucial point in its development journey. We face immense challenges from climate change and social inequality to economic instability. But alongside these challenges lie opportunities for transformation, innovation, and growth. The importance of sustainable development cannot be overstated. It is no longer an optional add-on. It is a necessity if Africa is to thrive and not just survive in the 21st century. However, achieving sustainable development requires substantial financial investment, which will not come without trust, transparency, and accountability. So this is where ESG disclosure becomes a key factor in unlocking finance. And I want to touch on really 4 different areas around this topic. First is the need for sustainable development in Africa. So Africa's development landscape is complex. Sometimes it appears even contradictory. Our economies are growing, but so are the demands for infrastructure, energy, healthcare, and education. At the same time, we are on the front line of climate change, with millions of livelihoods dependent on natural resources, from agriculture to mining. So the sustainable development challenges in Africa include, amongst others, 1, addressing energy poverty while transitioning to greener energy. That's not always easy to do. Creating jobs for a growing population while protecting biodiversity. Reducing inequality and fostering inclusive growth. To meet these challenges, Africa needs to attract both public and private sector investments. However, investors today are looking beyond traditional financial metrics. They want to know how their investments impact the environment, society, and governance structures. The second area I want to talk about is the role of ESG disclosure in attracting finance. Why does ESG matter to investors? First is risk management. ESG helps investors identify risks related to climate change, regulatory changes, and social issues. For example, droughts and floods can disrupt agricultural supply chains in Africa, while poor governance can lead to corruption or political instability. Companies that manage these risks effectively are more attractive to investors. While when we think of risks, we often think of financial and legal risks for projects, ESG risks and mitigation is also a key risk to address, as the consequences could manifest in greater financial and legal risks in the future if not properly addressed. And, in this regard, I would like to recognize one of my mentors and coaches in the whole ESG space. We had several debates. We agreed sometimes, we disagreed other times. My sister, Miss Senabuba, and One of the things I really learned, from Senabu was to move away from ENS compliance to ENS risk management and then to ENS value addition. We worked with an African champion. I remember this distinctly, and I'm not going to mention which African champion, but we worked with an African champion whose baseline on ENS was very low. But what we said is that if we are able to actually get this African champion to adopt ESG from a value addition perspective, then we had the chance to move the market in Africa, because that African champion would set the standards. So, Senabu, thank you for the mentorship. Please stand up and be recognized. Now I have a new mentor called Mamansani Isa, who has taken over and continues to coach me, but as usual, Senabu, I ask questions, I challenge, I debate, and so Mamansani is now experiencing that from me. But the second reason why ESG matters to investors is long-term value creation. Companies with strong ESG practices are more likely to build sustainable, resilient businesses. Investors are more confident in companies that plan for the future, use resources responsibly, and are committed to social equity. Third, reputational benefits. Companies and governments that prioritize ESG are viewed more favorably, enhancing their global reputation. This can also lead to easier access to international capital markets and large pools of impact-driven capital. And in some cases, it leads to more affordable financing and also financing with longer tenors. Last is the alignment with global standards. And once again, I'm just talking about why ESG matters to investors. As global standards for sustainability reporting, such as the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures and the UN Sustainable Development Goals become the norm, African countries and companies that adopt robust ESG disclosure practices will be more attractive to international investors. The third area I want to touch on is the state of ESG disclosure in Africa. So while ESG disclosure is gaining momentum globally, Africa is still lagging behind in terms of both policy and practice. Several key challenges remain. For example, regulatory frameworks. Many African countries lack comprehensive regulatory frameworks mandating ESG reporting. In some regions, business and financial institutions are not required to disclose ESG data, leading to inconsistencies and gaps in transparency. Second is capacity building. Many African companies, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, do not have the resources or expertise to implement and report on ESG practices. This results in a lack of comparable and reliable data for investors. And Senabu, I'm really glad to hear that you're working on really a model that would apply to SMEs in terms of ESG, using technology, and actually having it more practical, more affordable, and the ability actually to deepen the adoption. So the third is the data availability and quality. ESG data in Africa is often fragmented or unavailable. This limits investors' ability to assess risks and opportunities accurately. The fourth area I want to talk about is the path forward, what needs to be done. For Africa to attract the capital it needs for sustainable development, several actions are critical. One, to strengthen ESG regulations. Governments across Africa must work to establish and enforce strong ESG reporting standards. Regulatory bodies and stock exchanges should encourage or mandate ESG disclosures for listed companies. Capacity building for companies should also be done. African businesses need support to improve their ESG practices. This includes training, access to technology, and resources for collecting and reporting ESG data. Third, collaboration with international partners. like our partnership with MCDF. Partnerships with global organizations, development finance institutions, and impact investors will be essential in building Africa's ESG capacity and improving disclosure practices. Fourth, promote green finance instruments. For example, green bonds, sustainability-linked loans, and other financial instruments tied to ESG performance should be promoted across Africa. These tools provide a direct link between ESG outcomes and financial returns, making them attractive to both investors and companies. For example, we at the African Development Bank have pioneered what we call green shares. This is equity, the investments we've made in the Trade and Development Bank, which is an African development finance institution, with the idea that the amount of equity we invest and also additionally mobilize under the green shares instrument will be leveraged 4 to 5 times into sustainability, green, and ESG, resilient or compliant investments. We are looking to replicate this also with the Africa Finance Corporation, and Frederick, you mentioned that you also work with them. So this is an example of the innovations that are coming out, as a result. Fifth, increase transparency and accessibility to data. The proposed ESG hub, which is supposed to come out of tomorrow's discussions, which you'll be discussing tomorrow, will help to promote the business case for ESG disclosure, assist SMEs with providing the required information, and bring all available ESG data from across Africa into a single point of access for investors and other stakeholders. This is a commendable initiative, and Mamansani and colleagues who will be working on that, I wish you, the best in its implementation. So in conclusion, ESG disclosure is not just a box-ticking exercise. It is a critical tool for Africa to attract the investment needed to achieve sustainable development. By embedding transparency and accountability into how we manage our natural resources, treat our people, and govern our institutions, we will build stronger and more resilient economies. At the African Development Bank Group, we are committed to supporting Africa's journey towards sustainable growth. For example, we've established the African Financial Alliance on Climate Change, or AFAC, that aims to put the financial sector at the center of climate action in Africa. This Pan-African Alliance brings together Africa's key financial institutions, including central banks, insurance companies, sovereign wealth and pension funds, stock exchanges, as well as commercial and development banks to mobilize private capital flows towards continent-wide low-carbon and climate-resilient and ESG resilient development. Another example of what we're doing at the African Development Bank is we have signed a partnership agreement with the International Sustainability Standards Board to partner to further the global baseline of sustainability disclosures to meet the needs of African capital markets, which will enhance transparency, accountability, efficiency, and comparability, with the ultimate objective of attracting greater impact investments into Africa. So this partnership with the ISSB prioritizes engagement with African financial institutions as well, financial market regulators as well, and policymakers to provide capacity building and technical assistance to develop knowledge and capacity for effective sustainability disclosure in line with the ISSB provisions to support investors' decision-making. So, lastly, by working together, governments, businesses, investors, and development partners, we can unlock the potential of ESG to create a prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable Africa for future generations. I thank you, and I wish you great deliberations over the next 2 days. Thank you.